I stood on the marble step, veil trembling like a moth caught in candlelight, and the organ note that was supposed to sound triumphant felt instead like a low warning bell inside my ribs. My mother's smile was a bright fracture in the pews. My father's arm a heavy question mark hooked through mine. And still the sentence crawled up my throat until it perched behind my teeth. I might be marrying the wrong person. I remember the exact texture of that moment. The sweat between my palm and the bouquet ribbon. The way the priest's gold vestment caught the sun and turned into a blinding accusation. It wasn't a dramatic thunderclap. It was the hush after a record needle lifts. The crackle of silence where certainty should have been. I pictured Alex waiting at the altar. The same freckled constellation I'd traced 1,000 nights suddenly unreadable. As if love had switched to a foreign language mid-sentence. My mind raced through every unsent text, every argument about dishwasher loading, every time I'd fallen asleep lonely while he scrolled on his phone. I felt the weight of every wedding vow I'd ever heard. Forever, always, never, and each word felt like a stone dropped into a well I hadn't yet measured. In that suspended second, the aisle stretched into a tunnel of mirrors, each reflection showing a different version of me. The girl who wanted certainty, the woman who feared regret, the child who believed love should feel like fireworks, not this quiet dread. I whispered it so softly the words barely disturbed the air, yet they echoed like a shout against the vaulted ceiling. What if this is a mistake? I used to treat the word wrong like a verdict, a gavel slamming down on my chest. In the hush after my altar whisper, I pictured annulment papers, pitying relatives, the hashtag runaway bride. But that night, while my new spouse slept, with one arm flung across me like a question mark, I felt the doubt again. No louder, just clearer. And something shifted. I realized the tremor wasn't a defect in my choice. It was data my heart had finally risked uploading. Wrong wasn't failure. It was the first honest act of love I'd ever given myself permission to feel. I began to picture every misgiving as a small green light, blinking on the dashboard of a very old car. I'd been driving blindfolded. Instead of yanking the wheel or slamming the brakes, I could simply note the light, ask what system needed attention, and keep driving. The sentence "I might be marrying the wrong person" stopped sounding like a confession and started sounding like a compass. I told myself, if love is a living algorithm, then error is the only way it learns. My doubt wasn't a crack in the foundation. It was the foundation's way of announcing an expansion. I felt, for the first time, the tender sovereignty of choosing to stay curious rather than conclusive. I wasn't failing at marriage. I was finally beginning it. I had to crawl back into the lab of my own memories to understand why that altar whisper felt like a system crash. I replayed the footage of my childhood kitchen, my mother darting to the door, my father vanishing for days, me clutching a plastic stegosaurus like a life raft. That, I realized, was my private strange situation. Hazen and Shaver would call it anxious ambivalent. I just called it Saturday. My brain had learned that love equals a flickering signal, sometimes warm, sometimes gone. So it built a predictive model that treated every partner as a disappearing shape. When I met my spouse, the model ran its usual script: they will leave there for brace. The altar wasn't a mistake. It was a prediction error so loud it broke the model's speakers. That's where Friston stepped in. I pictured my brain as a thrifty librarian trying to minimize free energy, stamping every new experience fits or doesn't fit. The whisper "wrong person" was the librarian screaming, "Mismatch. Update shelf." My love map was still drawn in crayon from 1993. It needed the red ink of adult data. So I began to treat every quarrel, every awkward silence, as a deliberate perturbation, a gift of error. Instead of panic, I felt curiosity. Here's the delta my hippocampus can finally chew on. Slowly, the map grew topographical, mountains of shared jokes, valleys of mismatched rhythms. The wrong person wasn't a bug. They were the necessary noise that forced my attachment code to recompile. I used to think the apps were just a Buffett sample, discard, repeat, until I noticed my own pulse had started syncing with the loading wheel. Each swipe was a tiny prediction: green heart for "this will complete me," red X for "this will waste me." The more I swiped, the more my brain rewrote its love map into a binary of perfect or poison. I felt it in the grocery line, thumb still twitching, scanning avatars like produce for bruises. Somewhere between the 3000th profile and the 3001st, I realized the algorithm wasn't serving me matches. It was training me to fear mismatch. Every dopamine hit for a right face also etched a deeper groove of terror at the wrong one. My predictive model, once a generous, fuzzy intuition about people, had been hijacked into a risk-averse accountant. I began ghosting after one awkward joke, not because I disliked the person, but because the app had taught me that abundance meant I should never tolerate friction. The irony stung. I had entered the marketplace to find someone who would stay, and I exited conditioned to leave at the first statistical outlier. I carried that reflex into my engagement, standing at the altar with a mind still swiping, still scanning for the hidden flaw that would justify an undo. The modern conflict wasn't choosing among infinite options. It was that the choosing itself had made me allergic to the very imperfections love requires to breathe. I remember the night I told her, I don't want a perfect marriage. I want an honest one. We were sitting on the kitchen floor, the dishwasher humming like a nervous witness. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and drew 3 columns: expectation, reality, delta. That sheet became our first iteration artifact, the seed of what I now call my 90-day iterative commitment. Every Sunday at p.m., we light the same candle, slightly lopsided from the week. I knocked it over and we run the ritual. First, we each speak one sentence that starts with "I was wrong about." No apology, no justification, just data. Then we update the contract, 1 clause to keep, 1 to tweak, 1 to test for the next 7 days. Last month I wrote, I assumed silence meant she was fine. And she wrote, I thought his quiet was rejection. We turned those wrongs into measurable experiments, a 2-minute check-in at p.m., a shared Spotify playlist titled Mood Weather, and a rule that whoever feels the delta growing speaks first. The beauty is that the contract is versioned. We date every sheet and stack them like geological layers in a showbox under the bed. At day 30, 60, and 90 we hold a retro, not with champagne but with coffee, reading the strata aloud to hear how the wrong notes became bridges. I no longer fear the glitch, I court it. Each mismatch is a sensor, pinging the system so love can update before the drift becomes distance. I still taste the dust of that chapel when I close my eyes. How my vow cracked in my mouth like stale bread. But tonight, 1 year later, we stand barefoot on the same stone. Champagne flutes catching candlelight instead of panic. I raise my glass and hear the echo of my altar whisper, only now it sounds like a starting gun. The wrong person, I realize aloud, was never a verdict. It was a doorway I had to step through, to meet the version of us still being written. Every Tuesday since the wedding, we have sat cross-legged on the living room rug, with 2 mugs and 1 question: what felt off-key this week? At first the answers stung. His silence after my promotion. My eye roll when he forgot the recycling again. But the sting became data, and the data became design specs for a marriage that could flex instead of fracture. I watch him laugh at my joke about the overcooked lasagna, and I feel the algorithm in my skull update in real time. Error acknowledged, love recalibrated. The wrong person was the doorway. Choosing them every day is the only way through.